Hello, I'm John Wilson. Thanks for downloading Mastertapes from BBC Radio 4. In this programme, I talk to Paul Weller.
And if you're wondering by now who I am, look no farther than the mirror, because I am the greed and fear and every ounce of hate in you.
Hello, welcome to Mastertapes. That's the sound of Paul Weller playing Carnation for our studio audience here at Maida Vale. That's one of the songs from the album The Gift, released by The Jam in 1982. In the first part of this edition of the programme, we heard how the young pop poet Paul Weller was writing about hard times and big decisions in songs like Town Called Malice and Running on the Spot, and how The Gift signalled the change in musical direction that would see the end of the biggest band in Britain and a new musical challenge for its frontman and songwriter. This is what we like to think of as the B-side of the programme. Now it's the turn of our studio audience to ask the questions, and we'll have some more live music from Paul. So let's start with a question from Joseph Bramley.
I was brought up with my parents telling each other, stop dreaming of a quiet life, because it's one you'll never know. How does it feel knowing that A Town Called Malice captured many people's lives, and do you think it still has its relevance now?
Well, it's a brilliant feeling, you know, because it's... You can never know those things when you're writing them. You know, when you first write a song, you have your aspirations for whatever song's going to mean to people. But the fact that it's endured is a great compliment to a song, I think. These days, when I play it, it's almost like it belongs to someone else. It's almost like it belongs to the people or something, you know. And in a weird way, it's the same thing wherever I play it. If I go to Australia or America, Japan, wherever it may be, it's always a similar, or if not the same reaction. And why those songs connect, why a certain song connects to people, I don't know. I have no idea. If I did, I'd be knocking them out, do you know what I mean? But it's a great feeling.
Do you feel that with lots of your songs, that they have almost become, you've passed them on to us?
Yeah, certainly songs of, you know, from all those years ago. That's Entertainment's another one. To me, they become folk songs, you know, in the literal sense of it. And they're modern-day folk songs, I think.
And let me throw it back to Joseph Bramley. You say your parents grew up, you heard them saying, you know, you better stop dreaming of the quiet life. Literally, I mean, were they Jam fans?
Oh, yeah, no, they weren't just, like, randomly quoting it. No, I brought up, the tape was in the car, holidays to, like, Wales.
Has it had a traumatic effect on you or not?
I'm here now, so I obviously quite liked it.
Let's have another question. This one's from Rob Bryan.
Throughout my life as a soldier, quite often found myself in some pretty dark places. I've always been able to find a track by The Jam or Style Council or your solo work that I can find some comfort in and, you know, pick myself up. Do you ever get down? And if you do, does music help you?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think it's just, you know, it's inspiration in itself, you know. There's an often asked question where people say, where's the inspiration come from? But for me, it's just the music itself is inspiring enough, is the inspiration in itself. It makes me see the possibilities in life again. And it means so many different things to so many different people. And I love that. And I think that's very unique in that sense. But it always inspires me, man. It makes me want to get up and smash the kitchen up.
Who would you listen to?
My musical outlook is much, much broader than when I was younger. You know, it was either the Beatles or it was sort of soul music. So it's broadened out considerably since then. But in my car, I'll go from like Brazilian music to maybe some old sort of soul tracks to a new band. You know, I like hearing all of it, really.
Rob, they're talking about serving as a soldier. There is a Jam song called Little Boy Soldiers, which you wrote. You're imagining yourself into the life of soldiers in, I guess, an imaginary conflict situation. What prompted that song?
I don't know what prompted it, but I think it was a very rewarding thing when I met some 3 or 4 squaddies when we were playing in Germany years and years ago, back in the Jam days. And I was a bit like, oh, I don't know what they're going to feel about it, you know, what they would think about my angle on it. But they were like, it's really spot on. And they just felt it really captured a lot of it, a lot of their lives.
In the audience today, we have the poet and publisher Michael Horowitz. Michael, you published Little Boy Soldiers as a poem in a collection, an anthology of poetry called The Grandchildren of Albion. What was it about that lyric in particular that you wanted to put there on the page?
Well, I put about 10 or 12 of Paul's songs in Grandchildren of Albion, but in New Departures 1981 I included some of his poetry and was already loving the Jam songs, and I think of them all like a lot of great song lyrics as poetry also. And I was going to ask Paul about one of my favourite Jam songs, Still Down in the Tube Station at Midnight. If you can recall the evolution of that song from first inklings through to the completed recording.
I think it came from my own insecurity and paranoia of being in London, and I thought anyway it was a very violent time really. And you took your life and your arse in your own hands when you went into clubs at that time. You know, it was dangerous, I thought, anyway. This was kind of like sort of late 70s. I'd see a lot of people getting really badly beaten up at clubs. And again, I saw it as a kind of visual thing. I imagined it as like a little TV play thing, you know. I didn't really think of it as a lyric, and I just wrote it as a prose poem thing. And didn't think too much else of it. And then I showed it to my producer at the time, who said, you should turn that into a song, you know. It was a big sort of tune for me because it was one of the first ones that people really started to take me seriously as a writer, and I thought that kind of spurred me on, really, you know.
Because it is a very violent story of the protagonist on his way home in the tube station with the takeaway curry that he's taking home to his wife.
You know, because it's like any sort of writing, some of it you kind of flesh out a bit as well, you know. As someone once pointed out, well, how come, why were you getting a tube at 12 o'clock? Because they finished before that, but that's not the point, you know. It's the kind of metaphor, really. It's the image, you know.
Yeah. And do you make a distinction between the poetry and the lyrics? Do you keep them apart?
Not so much, really. With songs like Tube Station, and also Little Boy Soldier, actually, and there's, again, another one I wrote just as a story or prose or whatever. After I sort of found that you actually can make them into a song, it kind of opens up a wider field, really, to work in, you know. And in more recent years, I've not really thought about, these lyrics? I've just thought them as words. They haven't got to rhyme, they haven't got to have a meaning. I like the words.
Let's have another question from the audience. This one's from Katie Jones.
Do you find it easier to write music in a state of sadness or happiness?
I can write music in any state, really, to be honest with you. There is always that feeling that an artist turns out their best work when they're at the lowest point in their lives, which can be true sometimes, but I don't think it's a general rule. I think there's all different ways of writing, and, you know, I sort of see it that I'm a writer, and I write whatever mood I'm in and whatever kind of period of life I'm going through, whether it's a great time, whether it's a lousy time. My job is to write.
And do you write whenever inspiration strikes? You don't have to sit... So there's always a notebook to hand, then?
I've always got a notebook, yeah, and I just make little notes, and I'll see what I've got at the end of a few months, or whenever I feel I'm ready to write, I'll look through it and see what I like and what I don't like. And,
do you write under pressure? I mean, is there a different situation where you have to sit yourself down in an office and have to deliver a set of songs? Does that produce a different kind of song?
Well, yeah, it can do, yeah. I mean, I have done that in the past. I've had to. Two of the songs, which are two of my favourites on Setting Suns, one is called Private Hell and the other one's called Girl on the Phone, was exactly that. We had two more songs to finish this record, and I sat in a little office in West London somewhere, and I just wrote these two songs, you know, and they're two of the best ones, I think, really. The older I've got, the less pressure of me to complete something. And I guess there's also an element of being lazier when you get older. I mean, sometimes when I get an idea at night, I'm just about to fall asleep, and I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered getting up, you know. So, whereas years ago, I would have got up and written that idea down, you know. But I also still believe as well that if it's any good, it'll come back to you.
And so you're always writing, there's always a lyric which is developing, and there's always a series of chords going through your head?
Not always, but quite often, yeah.
What's happening now?
I'm going to start recording again soon, and I'll at least do some demos, and I'm probably just going to try and buy some instruments I can't play and just see what happens, or do something different, you know.
Really? What, learn the violin or something?
Well, not necessarily violin, I don't know, just to put myself in a place where I'm not familiar with anything and see what happens, you know.
Another question, this one's from James Clark.
You're right, Paul. I was just wondering if you're proud of all your work, or do you sometimes look back at tracks and think, what was I thinking when I made that?
Well, yeah, the latter, yeah. I'm not proud of all of it. But at the same time, you know, there's some records I don't really care to sort of think about or even listen to. But I also see them now that they're stepping stones to somewhere else, you know. It can't always be great. Life can't always be great. It's up and down, you know. And you look forward to the good bits and the creative parts, you know. And sometimes you have to go through the troughs, you know, to get to it. But I'm much more able to deal with that, and I see it more philosophically the older I've got as well. You know, there's times in my life when I'm really creative and I've got loads of ideas, and there's other times when it's a real struggle, you know. You can't necessarily do one without the other sometimes.
Yeah. James, I'm going to put you on the spot. No, in fact, I'm not. It'd be too cruel to ask you which of the ones you think he should have never committed to record. Are there any that you could out as the ones that you wish you'd never written?
No, I don't really. I don't see it like that. There's things I don't care if I don't ever hear again. but I don't, no, you can't do that, You were committed to them at the time. I mean, the songs, even at the time I was doing, I was thinking, I don't know, I just don't feel finished, it's not great, but I had to do it.
Are there any that you hear by accident, they come on the radio, that you think, I don't want to hear that one again?
No, I'm always have to hear my records on the radio. It keeps me and my kids in food and clothing, so it's all good.
Andrew Pigeon's got our next question.
When around the time of The Gift you decided to disband The Jam, you say it was your dad who you confided in first. How hard did he try to change your mind, if at all?
And just to remind people that your dad was managing the band.
Yeah, my dad was my manager, yeah. Well, it was tough, He was shocked and disappointed, but he didn't really try and talk me out of it. We didn't look alike, but we were very similar people, and we both kind of, once we made our mind up, there's kind of no going back.
Did your dad have an inkling of what you were going to say? Did he know that you were heading to break the band?
No, I don't think so, no.
So it really came out of the blue when you sat down and said, I've got some
yeah.
news.
Yeah, it did, yeah. And the same thing probably for Rick and Bruce. They knew that there's no change in my mind, They thought maybe I'd just go off and do my solo thing for a bit or something, come back, but it wasn't like that. I want a clean break and go,
There's a related question from Brendan Ivey. Where's Brendan?
Do you feel vindicated in your decision to split the Jam at the height of their success? As without doubt, it's kept the band's legacy intact.
Yeah, I do feel vindicated. I think it's a lot of things that people like about that band and about the music is untainted, It is of the time, but a lot of it's endured as well. We haven't had 30 years of us continuing making lousy records, which is a case of some bands, I take me hat off to people like the Stones, but it's not for me, I couldn't do that.
It's interesting at the time, though, when you split the band and you released a statement to the press, to the fans, and you said, I'm splitting the band because I want it to act almost as a template for the way that bands should be in the future. You get to a certain point, a certain success, and don't try and push it too far. And I think in interviews at the times you were talking about the Stones, Jagger, strutting across stages at the age of...
Listen, I take all that back because he's brilliant, I think, and long may rock as well. It's just